you can't read the word or say the word contagious without respecting the fact that it represents a relationship. Some viruses are more contagious than others. I mean, that is the fact. But it always depends on the host as well.
Hey, welcome to the Adventures in Brain Injury podcast. This episode is part 3 of my interview with Dr. Alex Vasquez. Again, Dr. Vasquez is a doctor of osteopathic medicine, a doctor of naturopathic medicine, and a doctor of chiropractic. He's on the board of the Institute of Functional Medicine, and he's written over 100 articles in peer-reviewed journals and over 20 textbooks. Very prolific, very brilliant, very good at breaking down complex concepts into digestible, easy to understand metaphors and all sorts of other tools to really help us to understand. So, I'm really excited for this episode because we're talking about self-actionable protocols that we can use to build up our host defense, build up our health, and to protect ourselves from viruses. So, and to deal with viruses. So, if you're enjoying these, leave me a review on iTunes. You can get there real easy. Just go to feedabrain.com/iTunes. Probably adventuresinbraininjury.com/iTunes too. Or go to iTunes and find me and leave me a review. It's super helpful. And if you can support me monetarily and you're enjoying these, it's so appreciated. Head over to patreon.com/AIBI for Adventures in Brain Injury. All right. So, Dr. Vasquez, part 3, here we go.
So going back, that was my general answer to your question. What could people do about this situation that we're in? I actually like social distancing. I use it as a lifestyle. So I'm okay. It's like I'm home. Now, but I have the social and cultural luxury of being able to stay home and having a home to stay in, for one thing.
Yeah.
And, that was also by design. We moved out of the big city a couple of years ago because we thought, things are getting weird. And if things get more weird, we need to be someplace that's safe. And lo and behold, we are someplace that's safe. So what could people do? Yeah, social distancing. I recommend it as a lifestyle, not simply in response to pandemics. That's a little bit of a joke. But the next step is, here's the thing. Let's go back to geography, or not geography, geometry. I think I studied that when I was 14 or 15 years old. One of the only things beneficial to learning anything about math, beyond basic math, is when we have to solve equations that have 2 variables, right? If you have an equation that has 2 variables, you're going to have a hell of a hard time figuring out the solution, right? But if you have an equation that has 1 variable, usually you can figure out. You just look at it and you run the thing backwards and sideways and you figure it out, right? In this case, here's my point. In this case, we've got an equation that has 2 variables. And we cannot solve that equation because we don't know what X is and we don't know what Y is yet. With more time, we're going to figure out what X is. Let's just say X is the virus in this conversation. In more time, they'll do more tests, they'll do more studies, we'll be able to characterize this virus, we'll be able to say, oh yeah, man, it's really contagious. But again, like I said, contagious, you can't read the word or say the word contagious without respecting the fact that it represents a relationship. So no intelligent person, if I can go that far with it, no intelligent person who really is trying to talk about this and communicate, no one can say that that X is contagious or whatever. I mean, we can kind of say that in some senses. Some viruses are more contagious than others. I mean, that is the fact. But it always depends on the host as well. AIDS, for example, isn't really very contagious, thankfully. I mean, yeah, people can pass it on to each other, but it's not contagious. It's not radically, let's say, contagious. Hepatitis C is very contagious. Measles is very contagious. So those are viruses that typically win the battle. They have a good chance of getting in and starting an infection. But again, we still have to look at the host factor of that, and that's the other variable in the equation. So if X is the virus and Y is the human variable, the question then becomes, right now we don't know how to define X, but we could do some things to help define Y, that's us, and we could help to strengthen our own defenses, right? So step number one, strengthening barriers so that our skin, mucosal membranes are well defended. So that requires nutrition like vitamin A, vitamin D, zinc, also B vitamins, of course. Step number two is, what could we do to inhibit viral replication? I know how to inhibit viral replication using nutrients because I've studied it now for 10 years, right? So we can do certain things to inhibit viral replication. Some of those strategies work better for DNA viruses versus RNA viruses, but they all still work to some extent. Coronavirus is an RNA virus, so it might be a little trickier. Step number three in my program is strengthening immune defense, and that's what we talked about. That's what you and I have mentioned a few times back and forth. That's not the same as strengthening barriers. So barriers is step number one. Step number two is replication. Step number three is immune response. Immune response has two broad components to it. Immune response is immune defense, which is your immune system attacking the virus or creating antibodies or engaging in cell-mediated immunity. That's immune defense. But the immune response has another component, and that is the ability of the immune response to self-regulate and reduce excessive activity of the inflammatory response. So, for example, in the medical model, you want a strong immune response. That's why they put adjuvants in the vaccines, right? They're trying to create more inflammation. But the reality is actually different from that. You want an immune response. You want to strengthen defenses, but you also want an anti-inflammatory component to that response.
You want to mediate that response.
Right. You want to mediate it, you want to modulate it, you want to control it, you want to promote tolerance. At the same time that you're promoting defense, you want to promote tolerance. Well, Shazam, that's what we can do with nutrition that we can't do with drugs. So for example, vitamin A strengthens defenses, but it also promotes tolerance. Vitamin D promotes defenses and it promotes tolerance. N-acetylcysteine is another really good example. N-acetylcysteine promotes tolerance and it promotes immune defenses at the same time. So, we've got this virus that we haven't completely defined. We don't understand it. Nobody understands it completely. Yeah, eventually they'll define it and they'll give us some descriptions. None of that is going to change the fact that we can still modulate the human part of that equation. Now, we could emphasize certain treatments or certain nutritional supplements more than others based on given infections. So for example, like for herpes infections, works very well. And for SARS, let me just think for a moment. For SARS infections, I'm talking about SARS-1 in this case, licorice also works quite well. In the case of SARS-1, licorice has been shown to inhibit viral entry, and it also inhibits viral replication. And with herpes, licorice works extremely well. Through a slightly different mechanism, in that it supports immune defense against the herpes through increased production of interferon. But also licorice, the component of licorice called glycyrrhetinic acid or glycyrrhizin actually appears to bind directly onto the herpes virus. So it's almost like a drug. It's almost like a target getting hit with an arrow. Speaking of arrows, you can probably see my bow behind me. I'm like the metaphor guy, you know. But so if licorice, glycyrrhetinic acid, binds to and inhibits the herpes virus particle directly, that's not necessarily the same for influenza or hepatitis or HIV. So like I was saying, you know, viruses have their characteristics, and our treatments also have their own characteristics, which may apply more or less on a given type of infection. But regardless of that, certain things, like I said at the start, certain things aren't going to change. You have to have zinc in your system in order to have a competent immune response. Zinc is directly antiviral for viruses such as rhinovirus, but also zinc specifically inhibits the coronavirus. I'm trying to think of which coronavirus it is. One of the coronaviruses is specifically inhibited by zinc. Maybe they all are. I just don't know. But like I was saying, we have to strengthen host defenses. We have to try to inhibit replication, and we have to strengthen barriers. You know, so let me summarize. Well, let me go to the fourth point, and then I'll summarize. The fourth part of the overall treatment strategy is supporting and restoring cellular health and also systemic health. And again, the naturopaths do a really good job of that. The osteopathic profession actually has some good research on that as well. So in osteopathic medicine, we have certain treatments called osteopathic manipulative medicine that have been shown to help people get over pneumonia, for example. And it's not a drug, it's a manipulative treatment. It's not chiropractic, it's not massage, it's a specific treatment. But those are things we can do. So again, I'm going to summarize the four components one more time. Step number one is addressing the virus, either trying to kill the virus or blocking its entry. That's step number one of my plan. Step number two is inhibiting viral replication. Step number three is supporting immune response. Immune response has two components. One is defense, and the other is controlling inflammation. So you don't want all the inflammation to just go crazy like, you know, napalm. You need to have control over that inflammation. If the inflammation's not controlled, that's when people get into sepsis and acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS, which is what kills people with pneumonia, a pneumonia-like condition, and influenza, and et cetera. That's the whole cytokine storm. Mm-hmm. You don't want a cytokine storm. You need to have some control over this inflammatory process. And nutrients can help provide that balance.
Right. That's the modulation of the immune response.
Right. And then step number four is supporting cellular machinery like mitochondrial function, which I've also written on, and lymphatic flow and vagal tone and stuff like that. I'm sure all your people know about vagal tone. So, you know, those are things we can do. We can do them right now. We can do them safely. We've got good evidence to support it. And so those are things people could do while they're sitting around. You know, like, learning is optional and it's available all the time, right? So you've got millions of people right now, millions. You got millions of people stuck in their homes and they have no idea what to do with themselves. Right? They're watching YouTube, they're arguing with each other, and maybe they're doing some good things like exploring their childhood traumas, or, you know, fixing the garage or whatever, or learning a new language. Probably some people are using their time wisely. I'm not saying that everyone's wasting their time. But one of the things people could be doing during this time is reading about antiviral nutrition.
Yes.
Shazam. they could learn about this stuff, so they're not going to be victims to this narrative for the rest of their lives.
They're able to empower themselves.
Right. You
Absolutely.
know.
And
So we all.
that's what I mean, that was what drew me to you to begin with. Was I was in a place where I was relearning how to eat and walk. My left hand was flexed inward,
Right.
Um, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna need to figure this out. In
Yeah.
addition to functional neurology and other things that were happening, I got to figure this out. I need to empower myself. And it's the same thing here. We need to
Right.
empower ourselves. And what's awesome is we have
Sure.
this amazing resource called the internet that that can bring us really brilliant things. And
Right.
I I love that I found you and found your writing, and clearly you make your concepts understandable with enormous amount of metaphors. You're the metaphor king right now. And
I'm
so
busting them out.
you're just killing it. And I'm just so appreciative. So just to recap, number one, prevent the virus from getting in, which is building up our barriers, our gut barrier,
Right.
skin barrier, our lung barriers.
Right.
And
So
there's a
so
nutritional component to that for sure.
yeah, absolutely. So if you're trying to prevent this virus from getting into social distancing, hand washing, um, that's part of it. Yeah, and those are reasonable parts of it. If you can disinfect certain surfaces, that's great. Uh, and if you can strengthen the barriers, like you were just saying, to block the. So let's say you're walking down the street and somebody sneezes on you, and you've got the virus in your mouth or in your nose. If you have strong barriers, and if you have certain non-specific immune defenses on those barriers, then you're less likely to get the infection. So some of those, so part of that barrier defense they're called antimicrobial peptides, and your body can only make antimicrobial peptides if you have enough vitamin D. So all of these institutionalized elderly patients who are vulnerable to this infection, 90% of them are vitamin D deficient. Of course, they're going to be vulnerable to this infection. They're all institutionalized. They live indoors, at least in some countries they get out and get some sunshine. But in the United States, I've never seen that. And I've done some work in like geriatric, so-called old people's homes, retirement facilities, whatever you want to call it. Like they have no system for getting people vitamins, let alone sunshine. So anyway, virtually 100% of those people are vitamin D deficient. If they're vitamin D deficient, they're not going to create antimicrobial peptides, and that's going to make them more susceptible to this problem.
Mm,
Well, we can either let that go as it is, or we can fix it.
right. We can supplement with vitamin D, or we can go
Yeah.
outside, or both.
Right.
And we're also talking about the immune system regulating, having it turn
Sure.
on and having it mitigate itself, and
Right.
building up our cellular and systemic health, so our mitochondria, things of that sort. And this
Right.
all points back to nutrition.
Yeah.
And we're talking about vitamin A, how that amps up, it strengthens our immune system and it regulates our immune system. Vitamin D, same thing. Uh, N-acetylcysteine, and these all produce that. Oh, and also licorice, zinc, and selenium are three things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Am I missing anything?
No, those are good, but well, I mean, yeah, you're missing. There are other things we could do. Sometimes drugs, some drugs have been shown to be effective, like against Ebola, for example, and a lot of other nutrients and a lot of other herbs like silymarin and lemon balm and things like that. But and I discussed just about all the important things in my book. But we have to talk about risk too. We can't just be Pollyannic about this. We can't just say, "Oh, well, nutrition is going to save the day," even though it probably could if it were used strategically. So let me just very briefly talk about risk involved with some of these nutritional treatments. And the two that we really have to talk about to have a responsible conversation, we have to talk about the risk of vitamin A, and we have to talk about the risk of licorice. So vitamin A is one of the only nutrients that really has risk associated with consuming, kind of a therapeutic dose. So I'll try to say that quick. My phone is getting really hot, so I'm kind of getting nervous here. I don't know if my phone's going to blow up or something. But the risk of vitamin A is that it can be toxic to the liver mostly, and then have some other consequences as well. So you have to be careful with vitamin A toxicity. You have to know how to dose it correctly. You have to know what to look out for in terms of toxicity. So I'll talk about dosing just a little bit, but I'll talk about toxicity. So let's just say this. As a general rule, people should not supplement with vitamin A at high doses, not for more than a week. So, for example, when I was treating patients on a more regular basis, I learned through experience that I had to tell people, you're sick now, you're doing this nutritional program now, but you're not going to do this program forever, even though in some cases they might. But if people are going to use high dose vitamin A, they need to limit that to 5 or 7 days, maybe 10 days. The toxicity of vitamin A looks like bone pain, head pain or headache, dry skin, chapped lips, and then some other abnormalities on laboratory tests. But people have to be aware of the toxicity of vitamin A. And some people get toxic with vitamin A starting at 25,000 international units, and that's a pretty low dose. So again, people have to be aware of that. And the other thing is with licorice. With licorice, a glass or a cup of licorice tea is a therapeutic dose of licorice. And it looks like this. This is licorice tea. So this is licorice root steeped with hot water for 10 minutes or whatever, and then it creates this yellow, amber colored beverage. And that's what licorice tea looks like. A cup of licorice tea is a therapeutic dose of glycyrrhizin. It's about 32 milligrams of glycyrrhizin. And for some people, that can also be a toxic dose if they were to consume that for more than 2 weeks. So the consequence of licorice, or the side effects of licorice, sometimes it's a benefit, but the consequence of licorice, let's say, is that it can cause potassium depletion and it can cause hypertension. So again, you and I could talk about licorice. We can talk about licorice inhibiting viruses and blocking SARS replication and blocking herpes viruses, etc. All that's true, but that doesn't mean we can live off of licorice. Licorice, if consumed in excess, can cause potassium depletion and it can cause hypertension. And that's true of the root, which I use to make a tea, but it's also true of licorice candy. So if people can get toxic from licorice by consuming licorice candy as well. So, the cliche of everything in moderation. And sometimes people get hurt by these things, and sometimes people get lucky. Like I went through a period of my life about 23 years ago, and I was drinking licorice tea every day because I had adrenal failure, and I was drinking licorice tea every day, and I didn't have any problems with it, but I could have had problems with it because I was drinking a lot of very strong licorice tea, and so I got lucky, and some people don't get lucky, So with vitamin A, you have to be careful. With licorice, you have to be careful. Most of the other things, I don't think are too bad.
Right. Zinc and copper. What about copper?
So when people consume a lot of zinc in the form usually of nutritional supplements, unless they're eating raw oysters every day, if you start getting into the range of zinc, like 50 milligrams a day or so, that could and quite likely will begin to impair the absorption of copper. So, if you're above 30 milligrams or 50 milligrams per day of zinc, yeah, you probably should take some extra copper, somewhere between 2 to 4 milligrams. The consequence, so let's say someone's immune suppressed, like their immune system's not working and they're zinc deficient. So we're trying to make their immune system work better, we give them zinc. In the process of giving them a supplement of zinc, we could end up blocking the absorption of copper. The first consequence of copper deficiency is immune suppression. So the paradox, I call it the zinc paradox. The paradox is if you give someone zinc to support their immune function, if you give them too much without copper, then you actually cause immune suppression via copper deficiency.
Gotcha. All right. So we have some tools to empower ourselves with. Nutrition
Correct.
tools.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to diving into your book, and I will be posting that down below. What else are you working on these days?
Well, right now only this.
Okay.
And you could share these videos with your people as well. I actually was thinking about updating the antiviral nutrition book last year, and I had created 2 videos last year. One was a review of the entire protocol, and the other was focused exclusively on N-acetylcysteine or NAC or acetylcysteine. So those are on my website. They're on the internet. My website, by the way, is inflammationmastery.com/antiviral is where people can find that information. So people can watch those videos for free. I think they can actually download the videos for free as well. I mean, I don't really care. I just want people to get the information. So those are ways, as you had just said, that people can empower themselves. But again, empowerment doesn't mean being all powerful, right? Empowerment just means you've got some tools in your bag and you have some things you can do. That doesn't mean it's going to work every time for every person in every situation. But generally speaking, yeah, we've got some good science, and we've got science of effectiveness, and we have the experience of use and safety. So we don't simply have things we can do. I mean, we could do anything. We could dance in circles, and try to solve our problems. But we have effective things we can do. We have things that are proven to work. And just like with drugs, we use them and we hope it works. And if it doesn't work, sometimes we raise the dose or lower the dose or we add something else. But these are things we can legitimately, use for ourselves and offer to our patients and clients.
Perfect. Yeah, I want to say again how grateful I am to have this conversation with you, and for all the work you've done. It has been extremely helpful for me in my recovery, and continues to be. I love how your presentations are so concise, and every presentation you put out, you walk away with tools that you can do
Right.
away, and just super appreciative of your work, how you really evolve medicine in so many ways and evolve the practices of so many others. Like, your reach is exponential, and it is such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm glad I'm on a personal level. I'm glad you and I finally got to talk.
Yeah.
It's been a while, since obviously I saw you in 2013, and then I saw you again last year.
Yes.
But even in those situations, we didn't have a lot of time.
Real quick, let me tell the story of 2013. I've
Right.
been doing some research. I had seen that changing my nutrition helped, so I was like, "Whoa,
Right.
what's this functional medicine stuff about?" And I was, Googling functional medicine all over the place, and your name kept coming up, and I was like, and I started reading your stuff, and like you had videos online as well. That
Mm.
I think you were an adjunct professor at Bastyr University at the time, and you were making video lectures available to your students. And I was able to watch these college level lectures from this brilliant man right here and learn from them, and then use what I learned, start implementing what I learned in order to restore my health. And I reached out to you. I think Facebook actually like suggested you as a friend, and
Something.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then I sent you a message, and I just was thanking you for the online resources. Told you a bit about my story, and you invited me to the International Conference on Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine.
Right.
Can you say that
Yeah.
10 times fast?
I probably could. But
Probably could. Superhero over here. Yeah, and while I was at that conference, it was on the brain day. Yeah, you had a whole day dedicated to the brain. I remember when you
yeah.
sent me that message. I was literally like, I was living at my mom's place at the time. I was recovering
Mm.
at my mother's home, and I was like, Mom, we have to go to this. And she's like, she got me there, and
Mm.
super appreciative of that as well. And that's where
Yeah, it
we,
was a good experience. We had you up on stage too. I'm sure you remember.
yeah, yeah. And that's where things began to solidify for me, because
Yeah.
I went up there. Yeah, it was on the brain day. We went out. We had a
Right.
cup of coffee, and you were like, "What was the one
Yeah.
most important therapy you did after your brain injury?" And I was like, "Honestly, Alex, healing my gut was what
Yeah. Yeah.
everything." And you're like, "We need you on
Right.
stage." And
Well, that's a good example of what I had said before, and that is the medical model is serious problems require serious interventions. And they're always going to sideline nutrition because they're going to assume that it doesn't matter or it's not whatever. But look, in your case, you had a serious problem that didn't require a serious big league intervention. It did. We're not talking about putting in a shunt or whatever. Change your diet, improve your gut microbiome. Now everyone's talking about microbiome, including me, I guess. But back in 20 years ago, nobody was talking about that stuff. But even your situation. This is my point. Even your situation is an example of where a serious problem. Sure, of course, you needed some serious interventions at the time, but later, what you needed were things that weren't quite so serious. And come on, like life doesn't have to be so dramatic all the time, right? Like, do we really have to? Like, the medical profession is the biggest like drama queen in the world in terms of uh, playing this role of victim and savior and
Mhm.
uh, and persecutor at the same time. So something, maybe I'll add this to the video later, but something called it's called the Karpman drama triangle. And the three components of that are: you have to have a victim, you have to have a hero, and you have to have a persecutor, or the person who's doing the damage, right? And the medical profession plays all of those roles. They're the victim. Look, we've got this infection. We don't know what to do. We're helpless here. We're going to have to quarantine everybody, right? That's how they play the victim. The prosecutor, mandatory vaccinations for everybody. Whether the vaccines work or not, irrelevant. Everybody has to get vaccines. A couple of years ago, they were trying to put statin drugs in the drinking water, right? That's also part of being kind of a persecutor, or that's being overly aggressive. And then they want to be the hero, right? So they want to say, we've got the solution, we've got the new this, or we've got the new drug, right? So if you look at it's called the Karpman drama triangle, but where people vacillate and oscillate from one location to the next. I mean, the medical profession does that all the time. That's why people get confused and they have a hard time figuring it out.
You know,
It's because it's a shape shifting.
Yeah.
That's what makes it hard to figure out.
Makes for good TV, good
Yeah.
good
Yeah. Well,
stories. Um,
why do you have so many television shows that are medically oriented,
right.
right? So obviously television channels and television stations, they promote drugs because they promote, these multi-million-dollar drug advertisements. But here's the thing. Audiences are not neutral. Audiences have to be cultivated. So how do you cultivate an audience to be receptive to the drug advertisement? You have to have a television show that sets the stage for the drug that's going to be advertised, right? That's why you see so many uh, television programs where the doctor's the hero,
Mm.
right? You don't see programs where the nutritionist is the hero or the massage therapist saves the day. Man, I had a headache. I thought I was dying, and I got a good massage. You don't see that, right? You see the medical doctors, and they're rushing in with the staff and the nurses, and they all have stethoscopes on their necks to make them look like they know what they're doing. I mean, come on, it's a setup. They're trying to condition and cultivate and manicure or groom the audience so that they'll be receptive to the drug message. So this is a system-wide thing, and we're all exposed to it from the times we're kids. I
This
remember getting vaccines when I was a kid. I remember going to the doctor's office and waiting there. I remember being told I was going to be a big boy and I had to be a good boy. And I sat on the table with the crinkly, tissue paper and all that. I remember all that.
I remember that.
That's part of growing up in a lot of cultures is you have to receive these official. I lost the word because I'm a little bit hungry right now, but you have to receive these certain rites of passage, and vaccination for kids is a rite of passage. That's part of growing up in the dominant culture.
So actually, I wanted to touch on this. I was recently informed that Denmark passed a law that allows their government to inject everybody with the COVID vaccine. But I'm not sure whether it's when it's available or or whatever, but it's mandatory. They're able to inject everybody.
Yeah.
And
Well, there you
I
go.
was thinking about the politics of a pandemic, how this sets the stage to where everybody is in a place where they're like, yeah, make vaccines mandatory, like, because they're in their limbic brain. And I see that potential on the horizon as well.
Yeah. Some people would argue that that's what the entire theme of this event is.
Mhm.
You
Yep,
know.
that's what's
But again, that goes back. I can have this conversation. It doesn't mean I'm being anti-vaccine. I could have this conversation on any topic, whether it's cars or gasoline dependence or whatever. What we're talking about here is being cultured in a certain way to be dependent on whatever the dominant power structure is. So we're all set up for that. We're all set up for that from the times we're kids, regardless of vaccines or anything else. We are conditioned to be dependent, insecure from a young age.
your reception's pretty choppy. I understood you, and I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's how we're often conditioned, and this is again where the empowerment comes from. And thank you for the tools for empowerment. We have the abilities. Let's empower ourselves.
Yeah.
Well,
So, we have to overcome that social conditioning to be able to do so. But, we have lots of different ways to do so. And one of them is reading and learning, and especially, learning about our own psyches, but also learning about specific topics.
yes.
No one can be empowered and ignorant of facts at the same time, right? People can be egotistic and they can be arrogant and they can be they can be confident, right? But it's a false confidence. True confidence, in many ways, comes from competence,
Hmm.
and competence requires discipline and knowledge. People don't become knowledgeable by sitting around doing nothing. It takes effort. At least, like in the example that you gave, at least watch videos that are educational, and maybe even read a book that's complicated every once in a while.
Right. Start reading peer-reviewed research,
Yeah,
or read Dr. Vasquez's book, $3. Get that,
yeah,
night of these times.
yeah. So it's 60. It's 60. No, I'm sorry. It's 69 pages of specific to antiviral, and then I added a lot of other information because it's a PDF document, so I could add other documents on top of the original for more information and videos and hyperlinks and downloads and things like that. So
And it has links to a bunch of videos and all of that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, good. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your work, and we'll get through this pandemic, and hopefully not.
right,
I mean, we've had many in the past. Let's we can move through this one as well. What's interesting about this one is we have the internet in such a heightened state
hmm,
right now. So,
right.
which I'm
Well,
go ahead.
I just wanted to. We had a little bit of right when you were talking about. I think you said Denmark was mandating the vaccine or something like that. I think that's we had a weak signal for those few seconds. So I just want to address that since you brought it up. The two components to that. One is, do we really want to give the government the right to enforce medicalization of healthy people? I think that's a question. I'm not going to pick a side on this. I'm just going to say that's a big deal. Uh, but the other thing is the vaccine itself. Is the vaccine safe and effective? That's going to be pretty hard to prove because they are already skipping the animal studies. They've gone right from development to clinical trials. They haven't done any. They skipped, according to some news, the news I've seen. They skipped the animal trials. They're going to skip the little bit of safety that they do for these things. So I think everybody is aware of the fact, and this was just published in one of the Nature journals, I believe. Everyone's aware of the fact that the potential for this vaccine to get released onto the market without sufficient safety studies is huge. And so that's a concern. If they were to make one that's safe and effective, yeah, people who want to use it should be able to use it. I don't, just because something is safe and effective doesn't mean it should be forced on me. Like carrots are safe and effective. Does that mean I have the right to force you to eat them? No.
I love that.
That was a good analogy. That was a
You're
that 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 could be my last analogy for the day.
with that analogy,
Right.
we'll call it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Vasquez. When are you coming to the States again?
Well, right now the flights are blocked, so let's just leave it
Yeah,
at that.
that's a good point. That's a good point. We'll come back to that question when the storm passes.
Yeah. Very
All right,
well.
my friend. Well,
Okay. Nice
all
chatting
right.
with you.
It's great chatting with you as well. And to all of y'all, thank you for sticking around. Well, there it is. I feel so honored to have Dr. Alex Vasquez as a mentor, as a colleague. He's such a powerful, prolific, brilliant human being that really breaks down these concepts into understandable terms. I have so much appreciation and respect for him. And I really liked what he had to say about things that we can do, self-actionable tools that we can do to empower ourselves. And as you know, that's what I'm all about. That's the reason I'm here today in the place where I am today, is because I empowered myself, because I listened to podcasts and learned what I need to learn, and then found the things that I could do for myself to bring me to the next level. And, let me back up. I'm here because the emergency physician saved my life, and my friends were around. So many things that contributed, but being empowered is what took me to the next place. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for empowering yourselves. And, if you're enjoying this, if you feel like you got some value out of this or any of my podcasts, let me know how. Leave me a review on iTunes. You can go to feedabrain.com/iTunes, or you can just go to the iTunes app, find Adventures in Brain Injury, leave me a review. Super helpful. And or leave me a bad review. Let me know how you like this episode. I would love to hear your thoughts. And the other way you can support me is patreon.com/AIBI for Adventures in Brain Injury. And leave me whatever you're comfortable leaving me to get these out. I would love to bring somebody on my team that could help me to produce these more often. So the financial support really helps me to make that happen. That's my next goal. So thank you guys again, and until next time, stay strong, stay empowered. All right, adios, y'all. Someone take me to a doctor.